Yo, what's going on, guys? That was a little bit of a teaser for Redline, which is actually live right now. So if you guys want to see the whole video, make sure to click the link above or down in the description as well. You'll find it there. And so today I just want to kind of dive into how I kind of went about the editing process, kind of show you a little bit behind the scenes of the timeline, and just kind of how I've kind of pieced things together and made a story out of something that I really wasn't too sure what I was going to do once I got to the actual event. So when it came time to sit down and put this piece together, I wanted to figure out some form of story that I can kind of infuse in it. And so what I came up with was kind of showing a little bit of what Adam LZ's sort of journey and the competition that he had to sort of go through within this. And then in terms of the actual stylistic approach, I want to kind of go more for a more kind of darker undertone sort of approach to this, rather than something kind of very uplifting and just epic, but more in a positive light. And so with that being said, let's throw some headphones on and hop into the timeline. So for starters, I am still very new to Resolve. I've been utilizing Premiere for a very long time, and I finally sort of made that commitment to utilizing Resolve in all of its glory as much as I can for all these different creative projects. And so actually, this was my first real true test when it came to actually editing within Resolve and not just color grading. So for me and my editing style, I like to utilize the music to kind of help be my guiding light in terms of the pacing and the sort of approach that the edit is going to undertake. And so I utilize a service called Audio. This video is not sponsored by them, nor am I sponsored by them at all, but Audio, if you're listening, let me know. They're pretty much like every other web-based audio service that there is. And so for me, what I like about them a ton is that they have a lifetime subscription, which allows you to just pay once and you never have to worry about it again. And so that was kind of like the deciding factor for me. And so in there, I found this piece here called Encounter. And what really captivated me was this sort of beginning part of this, right? This very dark, moody undertone that you sort of had. And the second that I heard this, I knew I had to continue listening and seeing where this piece would actually take us. And so you're hearing, like things are starting to build up a little bit. You're already starting to hear like these different kind of clicks and stuff like that, these kind of gears kind of turning, which leads me into some of the sound design stuff that we'll kind of touch on a little bit later. And so I was just a really big fan of the way this piece sort of started out. I then kind of skipped ahead to kind of see what was the general sort of approach that the piece sort of had. And all of it just really seemed really promising. So I just went ahead, took that, and dropped that into the timeline. Once we had the music in the timeline, just hearing those initial sort of hits just immediately gave me the thought of trying to do some form of reveal to kind of slowly kind of bring us into the world of the automotive space, right? So the first thing you actually see is this really cool tight shot that I got of just like a tire and kind of shined like a light over it a little bit, just make it really dynamic and interesting. And it just works so well with like, as the light kind of shines over, you hear that brass, really kind of allows that light to kind of travel over the tire. So to see another part here, just this is actually a headlight with the same idea, just a nice detail shot of like a headlight that I got. Right, and then one more here before we actually get into the actual title scene. In between each of those sections, I wanted to do something a little bit different that I've been seeing a whole ton of, like on Instagram Reels and TikToks and stuff like that. And that's that super quick, hyper cut editing style where you're seeing a bunch of visuals and you're getting overloaded with a bunch of different sound design elements. And so I wanted to finally get out of my comfort zone and kind of try to replicate that within this piece. And so I decided to do that in the beginning of this piece, in between each of those big sort of hits that you get within the music. So if we kind of play this back a little bit. You kind of get that sort of sense of seeing like a quick glimpse into what the rest of this piece is going to show you. And so in terms of how I actually kind of went about that, really just took the simplest and easiest approach when it came to it. So if we were to kind of just like kind of zoom in here a little bit, All I really did was I just took some of my favorite shots that I knew weren't potentially going to make the edit, just given the fact that a lot of these shots are from the car show that was actually happening outside of the drifting event. And the car show stuff isn't necessarily truly exciting, like when you click on this video, you of course want to see drifting and stuff like that. And so I kind of leaned maybe a little bit more towards those. And also I deliberately got shots that had a lower shutter angle, so there was a lot of natural motion blur that was going on. So if we were to actually just take a quick look at one of those clips, if I were to kind of reveal this in the media pool.
Chevrolet, big initiation from both guys. Oh, incredible initiation from Mike Nappy to get that car right where it needs to be. Big mistake from Josiah Falaise. Oh, it's actually good.
So you could see how much motion blur you're really getting in these shots. I knew ahead of time we're specifically going to be for these really quick sort of like few frame cuts that you were going to see within the piece. So I found a lot of those shots, and including some of the stuff from the car show, and I just took about 4 to 5 frames each, including some of them which I inverted. So instead of just doing 4 frames for one of the clips, I did 8 frames and just kind of cut it in half to be 4 and 4. And then I took either the second clip, or sometimes I even took the first clip, inverted the colors, and then now you have these 2 different clips that kind of have this slightly different feeling to it, slightly different sort of perspective altogether with it. And so once I had a good amount of clips, I kind of helped to bridge that gap in between both of the big hits within the music. I then kind of just smacked them all together, with no real kind of rhyme or reason in terms of the order, and just saw what happened. So if we were to actually just solo just the music with no sound design, and we're just kind of seeing the visuals along with the music, I knew at this point, I was feeling really good about what I was sort of seeing, and I only had half of the puzzle. And so when it came to the actual sound design itself, I knew that was going to be one of the more trickier parts. And so if we were to kind of dissect the sound design a little bit for this particular section, I kind of got a little bit lucky in terms of the sounds that I found. Once again, I went on audio and found a few different ones. I just searched up like cinematic gears kind of in general, a lot of generator sort of sounds and things of that nature. And I found things like this. So if we were to solo one of the pieces to the first kind of sequence of things, you have this sound. You got a ton of sound kind of baked into that, which really did a lot of the heavy lifting. Sometimes you really have to do this thing kind of from scratch. But I do find that hearing it a little bit more simplified rather than all together that you've been sort of always seeing on socials and stuff like that. When you're hearing the music, you're hearing the sound design, it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around where and how to even go about doing something like this. And so by being able to kind of solo this out, I do find that I would be able to kind of achieve this on my own. So this was one of the sounds we had. This was the second sound that I actually just laid underneath it as well. So it's a lot of flutters, right? A lot of flutters. Mix that together with the kind of mechanical gears that we had in the first one. And you got something very, very enticing and intriguing. Let's take a look at the second one. This one's a little bit more involved. So we have 3 different sounds here going on for this second sequence of things. And so if we kind of dissect the first layer, we have this. Again, mechanical gears clicking around, stuff like that, right? The second piece, we have this. Kind of like that generator sort of like, powering on kind of transitional thing going on there. And then lastly, we have this. Once again, just like another kind of flutter to kind of help us kind of transition into the sort of more quieter, simpler part, which is then just like this kind of reveal of a car door. And so now if we put all 3 of those together, we have this. Pretty sick. You then accompany that with a little bit of the music, and then you get these first 2 that sound like this. So once I heard that, I knew I was heading in a very good direction. Again, I kind of got a little bit lucky with the sounds that I was able to actually find on audio, but this is not something that is extremely difficult to replicate. If you just kind of dissect it, even just at the kind of gear level, if you can hear here, there's about 4 to 5 different gears that are in that. If you are able to find 4 or 5 different gears, layer them all individually, and just kind of play around with it, I'm sure you'll be able to figure out a way in order to get something that sounds really, really good and enticing. And so after that, we have our title sequence. I decided to name this piece Redline because I felt like it perfectly embodied what is actually happening on track. And that is, cars are going to their absolute limits when they're going around the track. And naming it Redline, which is what the car is hitting pretty much the entire time as it's doing the circuit, was the perfect embodiment for this piece as a whole. When it came to that, of course, you have the word red within that name. I felt like it was a no-brainer to make the title be red. And so, of course, we implemented that. I then inverted one of the clips that I just thought would work really well and work cohesively with the title itself. And then when it came to the sound design, I wanted to kind of implement some kind of photographic sort of sound effect. And so I was able to find this sound, which was pretty interesting. So it's kind of like that old school sort of flash photography sort of sound that you would hear back in the day. So if we hear that one more time. Felt like it was perfect to kind of like help emphasize that change in the inverted look of the piece. And so that was the entire beginning intro sequence. Now it was about trying to push the story forward. And so there was actual commentators that were commentating over the entire event. To my knowledge, this event was not live streamed. And so what I did to kind of find some commentary on this, I just went back to old broadcasts of Formula Drift and found one of the most notorious commentators when it comes to drifting, along with typically with his co-host. And I just found the entire stream and was able to transcribe it, find some of the best parts that I felt like made the most sense to help drive the story forward. And so the first thing you kind of hear, I have everything from that commentary here in orange, kind of like organized a little bit here. So if we were to solo these 2 tracks, we have the first part here.
What are your expectations here, Jacob?
I expect just a rowdy run. Adam LZ is just absolutely on one and knows how hard he can push this car, and I think there's still a little bit left for him to be able to do.
Yep. Thankful to all the fans for
utilizing this shot accompanied with the commentary that you begin to hear within the piece kind of work perfectly hand in hand to kind of help kind of push that aspect a little bit of like, these are the words that people are hearing within the stadium. And so if we continue on with what else is said, I wanted to kind of show off the crowd a little bit as well. So I, found this little section where he's kind of like thanking the crowd and stuff like that for kind of coming out.
Thankful to all the fans for tuning in, watching. Gotta love it.
Yeah. So great to see.
Yep.
So just kind of a perfect moment. What I then also wanted to incorporate was some of the flyby moments that kind of happen. So like moments like this where kind of camera was kind of locked off and you have the cars kind of zooming by really quickly, just like so. Right? Like super quick moment. And so I of course want to emphasize that speed. So I just found from I think a different clip that I have, just put that here, added a little bit of reverb on it to just kind of make that sort of cinematic kind of touch to it. So we had something like this. Right, so you're kind of hearing it a little bit at first. And then I kind of keyframed it up so that it gets really loud when you actually cut to the actual clip itself. And then just kind of fades off from there. So if you accompany that along with the commentating and then also the music, you get a very nice kind of build up before things really kind of hit their kind of climactic part within the piece.
What are your expectations here, Jacob?
I expect just a rowdy run. Adam LZ is just absolutely on one and knows how hard he can push this car, and I think there's still a little bit left for him to be able to do.
Yep. Thankful to all the fans for tuning in, watching. Gotta love it.
Yeah. So great to see.
Yep.
It's going to be a rough one. It's going to be contact, and both drivers are going to go absolutely ham when they come out from underneath the bridge.
And so this is the part where music can't always completely guide you all the way through. Sometimes you have to manipulate the music to kind of help you achieve maybe the duration that you kind of want for the piece, or maybe there's a particular part within the song that you're actually not really a big fan of. Maybe there's a small chunk of it that you're kind of just like, it kind of doesn't really add anything. It actually kind of maybe lessens the piece overall. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted this to be the biggest kind of climactic part within the piece. And so with that being said, I split off where that drop is within the song, and then layered underneath that the start of a different part of the song where there's this kind of slow riser kind of happening before the big dramatic part of the song kind of kicks in. So if we kind of only solo those parts out, you then kind of get something like this. Right, so you kind of get the perfect kind of blend between the two to kind of help transition to a different part within the song. Backtracking a little bit, these different moments where you're hearing, once again, that kind of like loud, sort of like undertone, like big, like, you know, parts within the song, I want to just emphasize that a little bit with some more of those motion blur moments that I kind of captured in camera. And so kind of showing that off a little bit. Once again, they kind of work hand in hand here. Right. Brown. Work very well together there. After that, I was once again just marrying the footage with some sound design together. And so in these different moments here, if we kind of solo some of this, you have the cars that are kind of flying by. There's 3 different cars that fly by here. So you have one that flies by here. So you're kind of seeing it on the edge of frame there. You have that one, and they have one more there. And so I have 3 different whooshes that kind of go by. So if we kind of go whoosh by whoosh here, that's one. And then if we add our second one, which is that bottom one, it's the second one, and then you just add a third one for the third car. Right, so now it kind of gives a little bit of context of what's happening on screen. I then incorporated the sound of these cars that are kind of going by, right? So if I were to just kind of include all of the flybys and the preceding kind of shot and those cars kind of drifting by. And I just kind of shut that off because now the clip is now over. We're moving on to the next thing. And so the trick is sometimes to introduce some form of contrast within your sound design and your edit really as a whole. And so I didn't want to always include, you know, the sound of the cars, you know, flying by or just the revving of the engines and stuff like that. I wanted there to be moments where we did and then moments where we didn't. And so, for example, in this piece here, if we kind of just activate everything except for the music track, and we kind of just listen to the sound design of these kind of second half here, you have the flybys and then you have the sounds of engines, but then there's also moments where there's silence. And so you have something like this. So there are these different pockets of time where you're getting a lot of sounds of cars and stuff like that, but then there's other moments where things are a lot more dialed back and we're kind of taking away, we're stripping that away. And I'm kind of accompanying that with the slow motion parts of the piece. So for the most part, anytime you're seeing cars kind of going at normal speed, you're kind of hearing the engines clear as day, but then moments where things are a lot more slowed down, like for example in this scene, you're getting complete silence. And then in this part here, once again, kind of stripping away the sound of the engines, but introducing this very interesting heartbeat moment where I imagine that, you know, the drivers, when they're going, right, they're maybe their heart is really pumping, they're really kind of feeling it within their chest, right? Because it's a very sort of anxious and very kind of intense moment that they're really going through. And so I wanted to include something like that to kind of, you know, add a little bit of something different, something dynamic to the piece. So it's not always just the simple engine, simple whooshes of the cars kind of coming by and stuff like that. Something a little bit different that you may not actually hear when you're actually there. And then, of course, if you introduce the music along with all of these kind of different elements, you get, you know, somewhere like this. With the music during this scene as well, I made sure to muffle this section of the music as well. Once again, just so that the music doesn't completely disappear, but it really takes a back seat to everything so that there's this moment of like really concentration and focus into this very kind of slow and kind of methodical moment within the entire piece. And so if we let this continue to play out.
New Jersey, E-Town, let's send it!
And so I wanted to incorporate something to kind of like help close this whole thing out. And so the commentator at the end there, that's kind of like his thing when it comes to commentating, is he'll typically say like send it in different ways and fashions and stuff like that. So I just felt like it was very appropriate to kind of include that as the very end of just to absolutely just send it. Kind of leave you a little bit on a cliffhanger, because this is kind of like a teaser sort of piece. It is a highlight reel, but it's just almost like a story-driven one at the same time. And that was pretty much it. It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but the music really does a great job of kind of, you know, lifting us all the way through. The sound design does a good job of kind of like help filling in those gaps. And then the commentary helps with the overall story and kind of figuring out what we're supposed to be focusing on throughout the entire thing. And that was pretty much it. Then it's just about finding all the best shots that we had, doing some interesting color grading stuff, which I will do a separate video on. So if you guys want to take a look at the color grading process a little bit and how I kind of went about it, make sure to check the description down below or see the end of this video. I might have it linked on there as well. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been myself, Steven. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, and see you later. Bye.